When you've been married for over 15 years, you start to believe you know everything there is to know about the person you share your life with. You think you've cataloged every expression, every mood, every subtle shift in their voice that signals a bad day at work or a hidden worry. You've seen them at their strongest, holding you during a storm. You've seen them at their most vulnerable, crying over a lost pet or a difficult memory. You've seen them in the comfortable, quiet routine of 1,000 ordinary evenings. Him reading a book in his chair, you scrolling on your tablet, the comfortable silence only broken by the turn of a page or a comment about the news. You think you know all the surprises your partner has left. The birthday trips, the thoughtful gifts, the spontaneous flowers on a random Wednesday. You think you've seen the best of them, the worst of them, and everything in between. You think you know every look they have. But I learned that night that you never really know someone completely. And that, I've come to understand, is not a failing of a marriage. It's what keeps a marriage alive. It's the mystery at its heart, the undiscovered country that exists even in the most familiar landscape. Because people grow. They change. And if you're lucky, you grow and change together, always a little bit curious about who the other person is becoming. It was a Tuesday. Not a Friday, not a Saturday, not a special anniversary. Just a plain, ordinary Tuesday in early October. The kind of day that has no business being memorable. I'd had a long day at the clinic. I'm a veterinary technician, so my days are filled with anxious pets and even more anxious owners. They come in with their sick cats, their injured dogs, their terrified hamsters, and they look at you with these desperate eyes, hoping you can fix everything. And you do your best. You hold the scared animals, you comfort the crying owners, you do the messy, difficult, beautiful work of trying to heal. But it takes something out of you. By the end of the day, my emotional tank was on empty. All I wanted was to get home to our little bungalow, kick off my work shoes, the clogs that always smell faintly of disinfectant and dog fur, and let the quiet of our house wash over me. I wanted to change into my softest sweatpants, the ones with the hole in the knee, and just exist for a while without anyone needing anything from me. I remember the drive home so clearly. The sky was that deep, dark blue just before it turns black, dotted with the first brave stars. The air had that crisp, clean smell of autumn, the kind that makes you want to light a pumpkin candle and make a pot of soup. The leaves on the maples in our neighborhood were just starting to turn, a hint of gold and red at the edges. It was a peaceful drive, the kind that lets your mind drift. My husband, David, had texted me earlier, a simple message that I'd glanced at during a brief lull. Got dinner covered. Take your time. That was so like him. David is a good man, a thoughtful man. He's a high school history teacher, so he's home before me most days. He likes to cook, especially when he's stressed or when he wants to create a little comfort. It's his way of processing the world, of making order out of chaos. So the idea of him making dinner was normal, comfortable, predictable. It was the safety of home distilled into a text message. I pulled into the driveway of our little bungalow, a craftsman-style house with a wide front porch we'd spent a whole summer refinishing. The porch light was on, a warm, yellow glow against the chilly evening. Through the front window, I could see the soft light of a lamp, but not the harsh overhead light we usually used. I remember thinking, with a little surge of warmth, oh, he's set a mood. Maybe he'd bought a nice bottle of wine. Maybe he wanted to have one of our deep conversations, the kind that started over dinner and lasted until we were sleepy and full of wine and ideas. I walked in, the familiar creak of the front door greeting me like an old friend. The house smelled amazing. Not the rosemary chicken from the story I once heard, but something richer, more savory. A deep, slow-cooked aroma of garlic, herbs, and meat. Pot roast, maybe, with carrots and onions. My stomach, which had been running on coffee and a stale granola bar, growled in grateful anticipation. "Honey, I'm home," I called out, my voice a little tired but genuinely happy. I hung my coat in the hall closet, my fingers automatically finding the empty hanger. I noticed David's keys weren't on the little hook by the door where he always puts them, without fail. It was a tiny thing, a habit so ingrained I could do it in my sleep. But they weren't there. That was the first tiny ripple in the calm surface of the evening. A single pebble dropped into still water. "In here, sweetheart." His voice came from the living room, not the kitchen. It was a normal voice, calm and warm. Nothing in it hinted at what was to come. I smiled to myself. Maybe he'd set up a little table in there, a special, cozy dinner in front of the fake fireplace we never used. It was sweet. He was always doing little things like that, little gestures to remind me he was thinking of me. I walked down the hallway, my socked feet. I'd changed into them in the car, silent on the hardwood floor we'd also refinished that same summer. The living room door was ajar, a sliver of warm, golden lamplight spilling out into the darker hallway. It looked inviting. I pushed it open, a little ta-da on my lips, ready to compliment his effort and sink into the comfort he'd created. The words died in my throat. The first thing that hit me was the quiet, not a comfortable, peaceful quiet. This was a deep, heavy, expectant quiet that felt very different from the peaceful quiet I'd been craving. It had weight. It had presence. The second thing was the lighting. David always turns on the big overhead light. He hates dim rooms, says they make him feel like he's in a cave. It's a running joke between us. But tonight, the room was lit only by two small lamps, one on the end table by the sofa, casting a warm pool of light on the cushion, and one on the bookshelf, highlighting the spines of our favorite novels. The corners of the room were lost in soft, inviting shadow. And there was David. He was standing by the fireplace, his arms crossed loosely over his chest. He wasn't packing, wasn't fidgeting with nervous energy. He was just standing there, watching the doorway, watching for me. His posture was relaxed but alert, like a man waiting for a guest he was genuinely excited to see. But he wasn't alone. Sitting on the armchair by the bookshelf, the worn, comfortable one we call the reading chair, was another man. For a split second, my tired brain couldn't place him. He was familiar but completely out of context, like seeing your dentist at the grocery store. He was wearing jeans and a simple, dark blue cashmere sweater. He was calm, his hands resting peacefully on his knees. His posture was open, unguarded. Then it clicked. Mark. Mark was one of David's closest colleagues from school. He taught English literature. We had him and his wife, Sarah, over for barbecues a couple of times. They were lovely people. Quiet, intellectual, with a dry sense of humor that took a while to appreciate. I remembered Mark had a deep, warm, gentle laugh that always made you feel like you said something truly clever. Mark wasn't laughing now. He just looked at me and gave a small, slow, respectful nod. "Evening, Clara," he said. His voice was as calm as if he'd just arrived for a scheduled dinner party, as if this were the most normal thing in the world. I looked back at David, my confusion now a loud buzzing in my ears, a physical sensation. My mind was frantically trying to piece it together, to find a logical explanation. Did I forget we had plans? Did Sarah get sick? Is there a school event I didn't know about? Why is he just sitting there? Why isn't David explaining? My face must have been a storm of questions, a hurricane of bewilderment, because David didn't wait for me to ask one. He didn't rush in with a joke or a flimsy excuse. He just looked at me with that same steady, expectant expression. It was a look I'd never seen on him before. It wasn't guilty. It wasn't apologetic. It was curious, intentional, and maybe a little bit nervous, but a good kind of nervous. The kind of nervous you get before you give someone a gift you really, really hope they'll love. A gift you've spent months planning. This wasn't a betrayal. This was something else entirely. And in that moment, standing in my own doorway, with my work bag at my feet and the smell of pot roast in the air, I had no idea what that something else was going to be. But I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that my ordinary Tuesday night was over. The life I had walked into that house with, just 30 seconds ago, was already gone. To understand why I didn't just turn around and walk out, why I didn't grab my keys, get back in the car, and drive to a hotel for the night, you have to understand David. You have to understand the foundation of the life we'd built together, brick by painstaking brick, over a decade and a half. You have to understand the history that lived in the walls of that house. We met in our late 20s at a friend's chaotic, crowded backyard barbecue. It was one of those classic summer afternoons, the air thick with the smell of charcoal and sunscreen. I was a mess, honestly. I'd just come out of a long, draining, 4-year relationship where I'd felt small, constantly managed, like I was a guest in my own life, always following someone else's itinerary. My ex, his name was Brian, he meant well, I think. He wasn't a bad person. But he had a plan for everything. He knew what we should eat, where we should go on vacation, what I should wear to a party, what books I should read. He was a curator and I was his exhibit. It was suffocating. It was like breathing through a straw. By the end, I had forgotten what my own voice sounded like. Then I met David. He was standing by the grill, laughing with friends, flipping burgers with an easy confidence. He wasn't trying to be the center of attention, he wasn't performing. He was just present, engaged, comfortable in his own skin. Someone introduced us and we started talking, and the conversation was easy, effortless. It flowed like a gentle stream. He asked me questions, real questions, not polite small talk, and he actually listened to the answers. He didn't interrupt, didn't try to one-up my stories, didn't offer unsolicited advice. He just wanted to know what I thought, how I felt, what I found funny. It was the most intoxicating feeling in the world to be truly heard. That was our beginning. He offered me space. He offered me the simple, profound freedom to just be myself without any pressure to be anyone else. It was like stepping out of a small, dark room into a sunlit field. Our first few years of marriage were about discovery. We discovered we both loved hiking, but he was the planner who made sure we had the right trail map and enough water, and I was the one who'd drag him off the trail to see a hidden waterfall I'd spotted from a distance. We balanced each other perfectly. We learned each other's rhythms, each other's quirks. I learned that he couldn't fall asleep without reading at least 10 pages of a book. He learned that I needed a full 30 minutes of silence with my coffee in the morning before I could speak a coherent sentence. But the real strength of our marriage, the thing that forged it into unbreakable steel, came later when life got hard, really hard. We struggled to get pregnant. We tried for years. It became the background music of our lives, the hopeful then despairing rhythm of ovulation kits and negative tests. We went through 2 heartbreaking miscarriages. The second one especially was devastating. I was further along, we had already picked out names, we had told our parents. When it ended, it felt like the whole world had collapsed into a small, dark point of pain. In that profound darkness, David wasn't the fixer. He didn't try to offer platitudes or easy solutions. He didn't say it was meant to be or you can try again. He just held me. He let me cry, let me be angry, let me be silent for days on end. He created a space for my grief, a safe container for all of it, and in doing so, he showed me that he shared it. He wasn't just watching me grieve, he was grieving with me, holding my hand in the fire. Eventually, after a lot of soul-searching and difficult conversations, we made peace with not having children. It wasn't a giving up. It was a conscious choice to turn towards a different future together. We focused on each other, on our little house, on our careers, on our friends. We became each other's project, each other's joy. And over time, our love deepened into something I can only describe as a profound partnership. We weren't just lovers, we were allies. We were co-conspirators in the adventure of life. We were each other's safe place, the one harbor in any storm. And that safety, that absolute trust, allowed us to talk about things that other couples might be terrified to even mention. Late at night, in the dark of our bedroom with a glass of wine and the dog snoring at our feet, we'd talk about everything. Our deepest fears, our secret shames, the dreams we had that felt too silly to say out loud. We'd dissect our pasts, our parents' marriages, our own mistakes. And sometimes we'd talk about curiosity, about how, even when you love someone with your whole heart, even when they are your everything, you don't stop being attracted to other people. You don't stop wondering. It's a fact of human nature that most people are too afraid to admit. You see a beautiful stranger in a coffee shop, and for a fleeting second, you wonder. You see a charismatic coworker, and you feel a little pull of attraction. These feelings don't mean something is broken. They just mean you're alive. These were always theoretical conversations for us, philosophical, safe. If you had a free pass with anyone in the world, who would it be? Does finding someone else attractive mean something is missing in our relationship? We'd read articles in magazines about open marriages, about polyamory, about different relationship structures, and we'd dissect them like a fascinating case study. It was interesting because it was abstract. It was a thought experiment that didn't touch our real, safe, deeply monogamous life. It was like reading a novel about mountain climbers when you're safely in your armchair at sea level. Or so I thought. Looking back with the clarity I have now, those conversations weren't just abstract to David. He wasn't just idly curious. He was listening. He was learning. He was paying attention not just to my words, but to the curiosity and the honesty behind them. He was watching my eyes light up when we talked about freedom and choice. He was storing away my reactions like precious data. He was figuring out a way to honor that adventurous, curious part of me and of us in a way that felt safe and true to our partnership. He was building a bridge from the theoretical to the real, one plank at a time, and I had no idea. So when I walked into that living room and saw Mark sitting there, a part of me, a deep down, intuitive part, wasn't entirely surprised. It was like reading the last chapter of a book you've been slowly piecing together for years. You don't know exactly how it will end, you don't know all the details, but you know with a quiet certainty that the author has been leading you there all along. Every late-night conversation, every whispered confession of curiosity, every moment of profound trust had been a page in that book. And now, I had arrived at the final chapter. I was still standing in the doorway, frozen in that sliver of space between the hallway and the living room. My mind was racing, a frantic hamster on a wheel, but my body was perfectly still. My heart was thumping a steady, loud rhythm in my ears, a drumbeat of anticipation. My work bag felt impossibly heavy on my shoulder, an anchor to the ordinary world I'd just left behind. I let it slide off and drop to the floor with a soft, final-sounding thud. The sound broke the heavy silence, a punctuation mark at the end of my normal life. "Okay," I heard myself say. My voice was quiet, almost a whisper, and it sounded strange to my own ears. Thin. "Someone needs to start talking, because I am completely lost." David pushed himself off the fireplace mantel, but he didn't come towards me. He stayed right where he was, maintaining that careful distance. It was deliberate. I could see it in the way he moved, the way he held himself. He was giving me space to hear him without feeling crowded or cornered. He was treating me like a wild animal he didn't want to startle. "Honey," he began, his voice as gentle as it always was when I was scared or upset. It was the voice he used when I was crying after the miscarriages. It was the voice of safety. "You know how we talk, late at night, about boundaries, about curiosity, about what it means to be truly, completely known by another person, to be seen in every light." I nodded, a small, jerky movement. My eyes flicked involuntarily to Mark, who was still a statue in the armchair, his gaze respectfully on the floor, giving us this moment. He was trying to be invisible, to give us privacy within his presence. "This isn't a theory anymore," David continued, his voice gaining a little more strength. "I've been thinking about it a lot lately, about you, about us, about the kind of marriage we have and the kind of marriage we could have. And I realized something fundamental." He paused, letting the words land. "I don't want you to just be happy with me because it's the only choice you have. I don't want you to stay with me because it's easier than leaving, or because you're afraid of being alone, or because you feel obligated. I want you to choose me, every single day, freely, with your eyes wide open." He glanced at Mark, who gave him a small, almost imperceptible, encouraging nod. It was such a simple, unguarded gesture between them. It told me more than any long speech could have. This was planned. This was intentional. And it was a collaboration, built on a deep friendship I had only ever glimpsed the surface of. "Mark and I have talked," David said, turning his attention back to me. "A lot over the past few months. He's a good friend. He's a safe person. He and his wife, Sarah, they have an understanding, a similar kind of radical honesty in their own marriage. It's not our kind of marriage, but it's theirs and it works for them. He's not here to take anything from us. He's not here to come between us. He's here to be present, to be a possibility, a safe possibility." My stomach did a little flip. A possibility. The word hung in the air, heavy with meaning, shimmering with potential. A possibility for what? "The point is this, Clara," David said, his eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that made me shiver, a current passing between us across the room. "Nothing happens here tonight unless you want it to. Absolutely nothing. That is not a request, it is a fact. This is not a demand. This is an invitation to explore, if you want to, in the safest possible environment I could create. With me here, witnessing. With your explicit, enthusiastic consent at every single step. You are in complete control." Mark finally spoke, his voice a low, calm, reassuring rumble that seemed to vibrate in the quiet room. "Clara, I want you to hear me clearly. I'm here as a friend. First and foremost, as David's friend, and as someone who has come to respect you a great deal through our conversations over the years. I have a tremendous amount of respect for you and for the marriage you two have built. I have no expectations whatsoever. No agenda. If you tell me to leave right now, I will stand up, walk out that door, and we will never, ever speak of this again. I give you my word. And you should know, Sarah knows I'm here. She knows why. There is no deception anywhere in this room. The silence that followed his words was a living thing. It pulsed and breathed in the room, filling every corner. I looked at David. His face was open, vulnerable in a way I'd rarely seen, but also hopeful. A quiet, steady hope. He wasn't looking at me like a jealous husband watching his wife. He wasn't looking at me like a possession. He was looking at me like a partner, an equal, offering me a key to a door I didn't even know existed. A door in a wall I hadn't even realized I'd been living against. And that's when the real conflict started. But it wasn't between me and David. It wasn't even between me and Mark. It was inside me, a full-blown war in my own heart and mind. One voice, loud and panicked, screamed, "This is insane. This is crazy. This is how marriages end. This is how trust is shattered. Get out of this room right now and don't look back." That voice was fear. It was the voice of everything I'd ever been taught about relationships, about loyalty, about what's normal and acceptable. It was the voice of my mother, of society, of every movie and book I'd ever consumed. But there was another voice, a quieter, deeper, more ancient voice. It came from a place far below the panic. It said, "Look at him, really look at him. Look at the man who held you through 2 miscarriages, who held your hair back when you were sick, who painted this entire house with you. Look at the man who gave you space to be yourself when everyone else tried to box you in. Does this feel like a betrayal to you? In your gut, in the deepest part of you, does this feel like he's hurting you?" That voice was trust. It was 15 years of shared history, speaking in a single, quiet tone. The fear was loud, chaotic, and immediate, but the trust was deeper. It was rooted in thousands of shared moments, in a bedrock of love that had been tested by fire and had emerged stronger. I knew, with a certainty that bypassed my rational mind, that David had never, ever done anything to intentionally hurt me. His love had always been a safe harbor, a place of complete acceptance. If he was asking me to sail with him into a little bit of uncharted water, maybe, just maybe, the harbor would still be there when we came back. Maybe it would even be a bigger, more beautiful harbor than the one we left. I took a breath, a long, slow, deliberate, conscious breath, just as David had instructed. I felt the air fill my lungs, expanding my chest. And in that single breath, the fear loosened its grip just a little. The tightness in my shoulders eased. The room stopped spinning. I became acutely aware of my body, my feet on the floor, the soft wool of my socks against the hardwood, the warmth from the 2 lamps on my skin, the faint, delicious smell of the pot roast still drifting in from the kitchen. I became aware of the 2 men, both waiting, both patient, both holding a vast, respectful space for my decision. I didn't walk out. I didn't tell Mark to leave. Instead, I took a step forward, just one small, hesitant step from the doorway and into the room. It was the most significant step I had ever taken. That first step was the hardest. It was a step into the complete unknown, into a place where all the familiar rules and assumptions of my marriage were suddenly, wonderfully, terrifyingly suspended. It was a step off a cliff, into the dark, hopping with every fiber of your being that you would either learn to fly or be caught. But it was my step, my choice, my agency. David's whole body relaxed, just a fraction of an inch. His shoulders, which I hadn't even realized were tense, dropped slightly. He gave me a tiny smile, a flicker of warmth and encouragement that was just for me. Mark remained perfectly still, but his eyes met mine, and they were kind, patient, and deeply respectful. There was no hunger in them, no agenda, just a calm, open readiness. I took another step, then another, my socked feet silent on the worn oriental rug, until I was standing in the very middle of the room. I was standing in the space between my husband, the anchor of my life, and this other man, this unexpected possibility. I could feel the geometry of it, the triangle of energy connecting the 3 of us. I looked at Mark, really looked at him for the first time, not as David's colleague or Sarah's husband, but as a person, a distinct individual. He had kind eyes, a deep, intelligent blue with little crinkles at the corners from smiling. His hair was graying at the temples. He wasn't classically handsome, but there was a warmth and intelligence in his face that was deeply attractive. I remembered his wife, Sarah, the painter. She was a little shy, but with a sharp, surprising wit. This wasn't some sleazy, midlife crisis setup. This was something built on a foundation of respect, and I realized a deep and trusting friendship between these two men that I had only ever seen the surface of. David trusted Mark with this, with us. That trust was a gift in itself. I looked back at David. He was my anchor, my reference point. "You're really, truly okay with this?" I asked, my voice trembling just a little, the vulnerability I felt echoing in the words. He nodded, a firm, definitive nod. "I'm more than okay, Clara. I'm curious, for you, for us. I want to see you, all of you, every facet, and I want to be here for it. I want to witness it." His words unlocked something in me. A door I didn't know was locked swung open. The permission he was giving wasn't just for me to be with someone else. It was far more profound. It was permission for me to be fully, completely, and unapologetically seen in a brand new context by the person who mattered most in the world. The person I trusted more than anyone. He was saying, "Go, be curious, and I will be your witness. I will hold the space for you to return to." I turned back to Mark. I walked towards him, the short distance across the rug feeling like a long, deliberate journey. When I was standing right in front of his chair, I stopped. He looked up at me, waiting. My hands felt clumsy, awkward, like I'd forgotten how to use them. I didn't know what to do. The script for this moment had never been written. So I did the simplest, most human thing I could think of. I held out my hand. He looked at my outstretched hand, then back up at my face. A gentle, genuine smile touched his lips, warming his whole expression. He reached out, slowly, deliberately, and took my hand in his. His hand was warm, dry, and his grip was firm but exquisitely light. It was just a handshake, a formal, almost polite gesture. But in that room, with that history, with that context, it felt like a declaration, a beginning, the first note of a new song. He didn't pull me closer. He didn't hold on too long. He just held my hand, letting me set the pace, letting me be the one to decide the duration and the pressure. I felt a flutter in my chest, a little thrill of the new, the unknown, the undiscovered. It wasn't passionate desire. It was something more subtle and perhaps more powerful. It was curiosity, blooming into experience. I was holding hands with a man who wasn't my husband, and my husband was watching. I turned my head to look at David. He was still leaning against the mantel, his arms crossed loosely, but his expression wasn't guarded or jealous. It was soft, focused, intensely present. He was watching my face, my eyes, the slight, tentative smile that was forming on my lips. He was witnessing my discovery, my unfolding. He was seeing me become someone new right before his eyes. Knowing he was watching, and that his watching was an act of the deepest love, fundamentally changed the nature of the moment. It transformed it from a potentially secret, shameful, guilt-ridden act into a shared, illuminated, almost sacred experience. I wasn't sneaking around in the dark. I was being seen, fully and completely, in the warm light of my own living room. I was being loved in a way I had never been loved before. I looked back at Mark. "This is the strangest thing I've ever felt," I whispered, the words just for him. "A little bit," he agreed, his voice a low, comforting murmur. "But a good strange, I think, a meaningful strange." I nodded. He was right. It was good strange. It was the strange of a new path in a familiar forest. The strange of discovering a room in your own house you never knew was there. I let go of his hand. The loss of contact was immediate but not painful or abrupt. It was just a pause, a breath. I took a step closer, so I was standing right beside his chair, my hip almost brushing the armrest. I reached out, and this time I placed my hand gently on his shoulder. I could feel the warmth of his body through the soft, expensive wool of his cashmere sweater. A real, human connection, warm and solid. He responded by placing his own hand over mine on his shoulder. A simple, reassuring weight. Not grasping, not possessive, just a reciprocal acknowledgement of the connection. We stayed like that for a long, stretched moment. I closed my eyes. I wanted to feel everything without the distraction of sight. I wanted to be fully in my body. With my eyes closed, my other senses sharpened. I felt his hand over mine, the slight roughness of his palm, the warmth of his skin. I heard the soft, almost imperceptible crackle of the fake fireplace, the gentle hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen, the sound of my own slow, deep breathing. I felt the warmth of the lamps on my face and arms. And deep in my awareness, like a steady, comforting lighthouse beam in the fog, I felt David's presence across the room. A steady, loving anchor in this new, uncharted sea. I wasn't adrift. I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The fear was completely gone now, completely evaporated. In its place was a profound, almost meditative sense of calm, of absolute presence. I wasn't thinking about what this meant, or where it was going, or what would happen tomorrow, or next week, or next year. I wasn't analyzing it. I was just here, in my living room, being touched in a simple, respectful human way by a kind and gentle man, while the man I loved most in the world watched with nothing but love and curiosity in his eyes. It was the most free I had ever felt in my entire 40 years on this earth, and the freedom came from a source I never would have expected. It came not from the touch of another man, but from the absolute, unwavering, radical trust of my husband. He had given me a gift I never knew I needed or wanted, the freedom to be completely, authentically myself, without a single boundary of jealousy or ownership. He had taken the cage of conventional marriage, with its unspoken rules of possession, and he had unlocked the door. And in that moment, I stepped out, not to run away, but to see the sky for the first time. After what felt like a long, peaceful time, it could have been 5 minutes, it could have been 20, I opened my eyes. The world came back into focus, softly, gently. I looked at Mark. He was looking at me with a gentle, curious expression, a slight smile on his lips. There was no expectation in his eyes, no demand, just a quiet appreciation for the moment we were sharing. I smiled at him, a real, genuine, warm smile that came from somewhere deep inside. "Thank you, Mark," I said softly, the words full of meaning. "For this, for being here, for your kindness." He squeezed my hand one last time, a gentle pressure, before letting it go completely. "It was a privilege, Clara," he said. "Thank you for your trust." And I knew with complete certainty that he meant it. He hadn't come for anything for himself. He hadn't come to get something from me. He had come as a gift from a friend to another friend, a gift of presence and safety. It was an act of profound friendship. I turned away from him and walked back across the room, towards my husband. With every step I took away from Mark and towards David, the profound feeling of freedom I had experienced didn't diminish. It didn't fade. It solidified. It crystallized into something permanent within me. I wasn't choosing David over someone else. That wasn't the dynamic at all. I was choosing him, and our life together, and our love, with a new and complete and profound understanding of exactly why I was choosing it. I was choosing it from a place of absolute freedom, not from a place of default or obligation. When I reached him, I stopped and just looked at him. Really, truly looked at him as if I were seeing him for the first time. His salt and pepper hair, a little grayer at the temples than when we met. The little crinkle by his eyes that appeared when he smiled or squinted, a map of our shared history. The gentle, kind curve of his mouth, the slight weariness in his posture from a long day of teaching teenagers. He was my home, not just a house, but a home, the place where my heart lived. I didn't say anything. Words felt inadequate. I just leaned into him, resting my forehead against his chest, right over his heart. I could feel it beating, a strong, steady rhythm that matched my own. His arms came up and wrapped around me, holding me close, pulling me into his warmth. He smelled like the pot roast, a faint, savory aroma, and like the familiar, clean, comforting scent of his soap and his skin. I breathed him in, filling my lungs with the scent of home, of safety, of love. "I'm here," he whispered into my hair, his breath warm against my scalp. "I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere." "I know," I whispered back, my voice muffled against his sweater. And I did. I knew it in a way I had never known anything before. It was a bone-deep, soul-deep certainty. We stayed like that for a long, long time. The world outside the circle of his arms ceased to exist. There was only the warmth of his body, the steady beat of his heart, the gentle pressure of his hands on my back. It was a moment of perfect communion, a silent conversation that said more than any words ever could. When I finally pulled back, my eyes were a little damp, but I was smiling. I looked around the room. Mark was gone. I hadn't even heard him leave. The armchair by the bookshelf was empty, slightly askew as if someone had just stood up from it. He had slipped out as quietly and respectfully as he had been present, leaving us to our own silence, our own reunion. The silence in the room was different now. It wasn't the charged, expectant, almost electric silence from before. It wasn't the heavy, confused silence of my arrival. This was a peaceful, settled, profound silence. A silence full of unspoken understanding, of shared experience, of deepened love. It was the silence of two people who had just been through something significant together and didn't need to talk about it yet. We went to the kitchen then, hand in hand. David had made a beautiful pot roast, just as I had imagined. It was in a big Dutch oven, the meat falling apart tender, surrounded by carrots and potatoes that had soaked up all the savory juices. He'd also made a simple green salad and had opened a bottle of our favorite red wine, a Cabernet from a little vineyard we'd visited on a trip to California years ago. We ate at the kitchen table, not in the living room. The kitchen was brighter, more ordinary. We talked about my day at the clinic, about a frightened golden retriever who had to have 17 staples removed and was so brave, about a grumpy cat who had tried to bite me. We talked about a difficult student he was dealing with at school, a teenager who was acting out, and he was trying to figure out how to reach. We talked about the leaves changing color, about a movie we wanted to see, about whether we should get the chimney swept before winter. Normal, ordinary things. But everything was different, profoundly, beautifully different. The ordinary felt sacred. Every glance we shared held a new depth of understanding. Every casual touch, his hand on mine as he passed the salt, my foot brushing against his under the table, felt more meaningful, more deliberate. We had walked to the very edge of our marriage, looked over the side into a vast unknown, and instead of falling, we had discovered our footing was more solid than it had ever been. The edge wasn't a cliff, it was a lookout point, a place from which we could see our whole world spread out before us, more beautiful than we had ever realized. Later that night, lying in bed, with David's arm wrapped around me, the room dark and quiet except for the soft sound of his breathing, I finally asked the question that had been hovering at the edge of my mind all evening. I turned in his arms so I could see his face in the dim light from the window. "David," I whispered. "Mem," he was half asleep, content. "What were you thinking while you were watching in the living room?" He was quiet for a long moment. I felt him shift, his arm tightening around me. I could feel him thinking, choosing his words carefully. "I was thinking how beautiful you are," he said finally, his voice a low, sleepy murmur. "But not just your face, not just the way you looked in the soft light. I was thinking about your spirit, the thing that makes you you. I was watching you realize you were free. I was watching you process it, accept it, and then just be in it. I was watching you unfurl like a flower opening. It was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." He paused, and I felt him press a gentle kiss to the top of my head. "I wasn't watching you with Mark, Clara. Not really. I mean, I saw you with him, of course. But that's not what I was focused on. I was watching you with yourself. I was watching you discover a new part of yourself, and I was just honored. Honored that you trusted me enough to let me witness it. Honored that you felt safe enough to explore with me right there." His words brought a fresh wave of tears to my eyes, but they weren't sad tears. They were tears of gratitude, of overwhelming love. He had seen me. The real, deepest, most authentic me. And he not only loved what he saw, he was honored by it. He considered my vulnerability a gift. In the weeks and months that followed, the shift in our relationship was palpable. It was like the air had been cleared of some invisible dust. The trust between us was no longer just a belief, a hope, a promise. It was a living, breathing, tangible thing. You could feel it in the room with us. It was a new foundation, stronger and wider than the old one. We were more patient with each other. The little annoyances that used to spark minor arguments, the way he left his socks by the sofa, the way I took too long in the bathroom, seemed to melt away, becoming insignificant in the face of this new, deeper connection. We were more tender. We found ourselves reaching for each other more often, just for a hug, a kiss on the cheek, a hand on the arm. Physical touch became a constant, quiet reassurance. Arguments were rarer, and when they did happen, they were softer, quicker to resolve. We had nothing to hide from each other. We had proven in the most extreme way possible that we could handle anything, absolutely anything, as long as we handled it together with honesty and love. The old fears, the fear of jealousy, the fear of being replaced, the fear of being found wanting, they had been exposed to the light and had simply dissolved. I thought about Mark sometimes in those early weeks, not with longing or regret, but with a quiet warmth. He had been a catalyst, a gentle presence that had allowed something new to be born. I felt nothing but gratitude towards him. We saw Mark and Sarah a few times after that, at school events or casual get-togethers with friends. The first time was at a department picnic, a few weeks later. My heart did a little skip when I saw him across the lawn, but it wasn't nervousness. It was just awareness. He saw me at the same time. He smiled, that same gentle, warm smile, and gave me a small, casual wave. No awkwardness, no loaded glances, just a friendly greeting. I smiled and waved back. Sarah was beside him, laughing at something. She caught my eye and gave me a warm, open smile too. She knew everything, and she was smiling at me. That was the moment I truly understood the depth of the honesty that had been at play. There were no secrets, no hidden pacts. This was a network of trust that extended beyond just me and David. It was a choice they had all made together to live with a different kind of honesty. After the picnic, as we were getting our food from the buffet table, Mark came up beside me. David was a few feet away, talking to another teacher. "How are you doing, Clara?" Mark asked, his voice low and genuine. I looked at him, this man who had been part of such an intimate moment in my life. "I'm really good, Mark," I said, and I meant it. "How are you?" "I'm good," he said. He paused, then added, "That was a meaningful evening. For me, too. I just wanted you to know that. I'm glad it was you." I felt a wave of warmth for him. "I'm glad it was you, too," I said. And that was it. The entire conversation. No need for more. We had shared something and we both valued it, and that was enough. He walked back to Sarah, who linked her arm through his. They were solid, and so were we. That was over 5 years ago now. Mark and Sarah remain our friends to this day. The four of us have dinner together a couple of times a year. We talk about books and movies and their kids. They have 2 lovely teenagers and our aging dog. The memory of that Tuesday evening is a quiet undercurrent in our friendship, a shared secret that isn't a secret at all, but a beautiful, strange, and precious memory that binds us in a unique way. It's a thread of gold in the tapestry of our relationship. People might hear this story and have 1,000 questions. They might judge us. They might call it dangerous or wrong or crazy or a recipe for disaster. They might think David is weak, or that I manipulated him, or that Mark is a predator, or that Sarah is a fool. I know that. I understand why those judgments come so easily. We live in a world that gives us very clear scripts for marriage, for love, for fidelity. We are told that love is a cage, and that the bars are jealousy and possession. We are told that wanting to keep someone all to yourself is proof of love, and that any deviation from that is a betrayal. And maybe, for some people, for most people, that script is the right one. Maybe that cage is what feels safe. And that's okay. Truly, I'm not here to tell anyone how to live or how to love. For us, for David and me, that script was never quite a perfect fit. We were always a little too curious, a little too honest, a little too hungry for the real, messy, complicated truth of each other. The cage of conventional expectations always felt a little too small. That Tuesday night, David didn't break the cage. He unlocked the door, and he didn't do it because he wanted me to run away. He did it because he wanted me to stay, not because I had to, but because I chose to. And I did. I chose him. I chose our life. I chose the man who loved me enough to give me space to discover myself, even at the risk of losing me. That choice, made in complete and total freedom, was more powerful, more binding, than any promise I could have ever made under the constraint of "till death do us part." It was a renewal of our vows, not spoken in a church, but lived in our living room. I think about our friends, the ones who have struggled in their marriages, the ones who have cheated or been cheated on, the ones who have drifted apart into silent, bitter coexistence. And I wonder sometimes if the root of their pain isn't the infidelity itself, but the secrecy, the lies, the betrayal of trust, the knowledge that their partner was living a whole other life, having whole other experiences, and shutting them out completely. What David gave me was the opposite of that. He gave me an experience and he said, "I want to be there. I want to see it. I want it to be ours, not yours alone." He transformed a potentially secret act into a shared one. He took something that could have driven us apart and used it to pull us closer. I'm not saying it's for everyone. It took 15 years of building an unshakable foundation to get to that point. It took countless late-night conversations, a deep understanding of each other's souls, and a love that had been tested in the fires of real grief. It wasn't a whim. It wasn't a midlife crisis. It was the logical, beautiful, terrifying conclusion of a lifetime of choosing each other. And the result wasn't a weakening of our bond. It was a deepening beyond anything I could have imagined. The trust we have now is not the innocent trust of newlyweds who haven't been tested. It's the hardened, resilient, knowing trust of survivors, of explorers. We have seen each other in a new light, and we have found that we are both more beautiful, more complex, and more worthy of love than we ever knew. Our lives have changed in small ways since that Tuesday night 5 years ago. We finally redid the living room. We got rid of that old bookshelf and the worn armchair. We painted the walls a soft, warm gray and got a new, larger sofa. It's a beautiful room now, brighter, more open. The memory of that night isn't in the furniture anymore. It's in the walls themselves, in the very atmosphere of the space. Sometimes on a quiet evening, when the light is just right, that soft, golden hour light just before sunset, I'll walk past that room and pause in the doorway. I'll remember that night. I'll remember the tired, confused woman who walked in, burdened by her work bag and her expectations. And I'll remember the woman who walked out, an hour or so later, lighter, freer, and completely, deeply known. I'll stand there for a moment, a ghost of my past self watching a ghost of a memory, and I'll feel a surge of gratitude so powerful it takes my breath away. I think about the word betrayal. It's such a heavy, ugly word. It implies a breaking of trust, a shattering of something sacred. But what happened in our living room that night wasn't a breaking of trust. It was an expansion of it. We took the trust we had, this precious, delicate thing we had nurtured for 15 years, and we stretched it. We pulled on it from all sides, testing its limits, and instead of snapping, it grew. It became bigger, stronger, more resilient, capable of holding more honesty, more freedom, more love than we ever thought possible. The lesson I carry with me now, the one I would whisper into the ear of every young couple just starting out, isn't a lesson about marriage, necessarily. It's a lesson about people. It's about the profound danger of assuming you know someone's limits, especially the limits of the person you love most in the world. We build these little boxes for the people we love, based on our own fears and insecurities. We assume they can't handle this, or wouldn't want that. We protect them from ourselves, from our own desires, from our own curiosity. David didn't do that. He didn't assume he knew my limits. He didn't protect me from a possibility he thought I couldn't handle. He asked. He created a space, a safe and loving container for me to discover my own boundaries for myself. He trusted me to know my own heart, and that, I believe, is the highest form of love. And the other lesson, the one that echoes in my mind every time I pause in that doorway, it's about the doors we keep closed in our own lives, in our own hearts. We all have them. Doors to conversations we're too afraid to have with our partners. Doors to parts of ourselves we keep hidden, even from the people we love most, because we're afraid of their reaction, afraid of being judged, afraid of being abandoned. We think we're protecting our relationships by keeping those doors shut, by keeping those rooms dark and locked. We think we're being kind, being prudent, being safe. But sometimes the strongest, bravest, most loving thing you can do is to take a key, walk up to one of those doors and open it. To let the light in. To let your partner see what's behind it. To say, here I am, all of me. The scary parts, the curious parts, the parts I'm ashamed of. Do you still love me? You might find, as I did, that they don't run away. You might find that they step inside with you, take your hand, and look around with curiosity and love. And you might find that the room you enter together is bigger and brighter and more beautiful than anything you could have ever built alone, because you built it together with all the lights on. Love isn't a cage, it's a home. And a real home needs doors that open, not just walls that keep you in. It needs windows that let in fresh air and new perspectives. It needs space for you to grow and change and become the person you're meant to be. It needs a partner who will hand you the key and say, go ahead, explore, I'll be right here when you get back." My husband gave me that key. He trusted me enough to let me go, even just for a moment, to the very edge of ourselves, so that I could choose, with my whole, free, untethered heart, to come back. And I did. I came back to the man who loved me enough to give me the greatest gift of all, my own freedom. And that, I believe with all my heart, is what a real partnership is all about. It's not about holding on. It's not about possession. It's about creating a place so safe, so full of radical trust and acceptance that the other person never, ever wants to let go. It's about building a home for the soul,